today's hearing. This hearing today isn't about any one company or one sector or one nation. This is about how Congress will respond to other nations, in this case, specifically China, wiping out U.S. transit and rail manufacturing and yet taking away more of our high-paying blue-collar jobs. I've been fighting these sorts of battles for many decades. I opposed every so-called free trade agreement since I've been here. I opposed China's ascension to the WTO under Clinton's premise that if we put them in the WTO, they'd follow the rules. They don't, and they haven't. And I'm going to use all the tools we have to see that they don't decimate the freight industry in America like they did in Australia in a very short period of time, and that they don't decimate our rail car, passenger rail car, and bus manufacturing in this country. It's not just about the ultimate assembly, it's about all of the parts that go into these vehicles and all the jobs that they support. So today we're going to focus on that issue. State-owned enterprises. I was having a conversation with the President's economic advisor about the Jones Act, and he said, well, you don't understand, I'm a free market guy, I like competition. And I said, well, Larry, is it competition for an American shipyard to compete with the government of communist China? And he really had to kind of think about that for a minute, and he, well, yeah. I said, yeah, how about competition with a level playing field? In this case, U.S. companies currently produce the majority of freight rail cars. That we have one of the most robust freight networks in the world, 65,000 jobs. But as I mentioned earlier, we saw that industry wiped out in Australia by China in a very short period of time. And I believe they've set their targets, and part of their 2025 plan is to take over that industry worldwide with unfair, subsidized, in this case of the rail car company, CRRC, state-owned. Communist government of China owns the company. And in the case of the BYD, we have a company that is very heavily subsidized by the government of communist China. I strengthened, we had a long discussion, we did the FAST Act, and we moved up the Buy America standards of domestic content up to 70%, and we're phasing that in. Yet there are loopholes in the way things are defined: sub-assembly, assembly, component, system, whatever. We've had these discussions before. Clearly, the law needs some clarification. And in the case of BYD, they send over all these small batteries made in China, send over a battery case made in China, but workers here assemble it, and then they claim that was made in America and it constitutes 53% of the value of the bus. I mean, clearly there's something wrong with the way that's being scored, and that's not made in America. And I have a local example in my district. Sometimes politics is local. My LTD, my local bus company, ordered some of these spiffy BYD buses in 2016. After they finally were belatedly and outside the contract delivered and didn't work, they were sent back. Albuquerque, of course, is in litigation with BYD for dysfunctional buses. I understand. Transit agencies are under a lot of pressure. Federal government hasn't been a good partner. We've got a $100 billion backlog for state of good repair in our transit, which could be one hell of a lot of American jobs if we go about this right. But the federal government hasn't had the will, nor has Congress, to raise the revenues necessary to better partner and begin to chip away at that deficit. So some transit agencies have turned to these below-cost vehicles or very low-cost vehicles. Again, I can't totally blame them. But for every U.S. transit rail car final assembly job, and yeah, some of these they're union jobs, good jobs, and this isn't about those workers. They're doing the best they can with what the Chinese ship here for them to put together. and they don't do the engineering and design work. All that's done in China, where many of the problems lie. And for every one of those jobs we get as assembling a Chinese parts over here, we lose 3.5 jobs in our economy. And that includes an assumption that they're complied with Buy America, which I think in this case is very, very questionable. They're smart. They unionized. They put these plants in very strategic places. They didn't know Democrats were going to take over the House, so they put the plant in Kevin McCarthy's district. I think they would put it in someone else's district if they'd known Democrats were going to take over the House. But they aren't dumb. So we're here today to get into this issue and see what remedies might lie. Legislation has been introduced in the Senate and in the House to address this issue. Harley Ruda, a member of this committee, is the sponsor in the House. And we will be looking and talking about that legislation here today in the hearing. With that, I'd yield back the balance of my time and recognize the ranking member, Representative